never imagined my first week in Beijing would involve almost setting a dumpling shop on fire. It wasn't entirely my fault. The bamboo steamer was already leaning too close to the flame, and when I waved my hands too dramatically to explain that I did not, under any circumstances, want chicken feet in my soup, smoke suddenly curled upwards like a warning signal. "Miss! Careful!" someone shouted in Mandarin. The waitress snatched the basket with lightning speed, and disaster was narrowly avoided. My face flushed redder than the lanterns above me, and I wanted to vanish beneath the table. That, unfortunately, was my first real adventure with Chinese cuisine. My name is Emily Carter, 23 years old, from a quiet English town where nothing more exciting than a new bakery item ever happened. After finishing university, I signed a 1-year teaching contract in Beijing. Why? A dangerous mix of late-night binge-watching Chinese dramas and impulsive decision-making fueled by instant noodles. So here I was, lost in translation with barely enough Mandarin to say hello and panda. The city itself was overwhelming: neon lights, crowded subway trains, the smell of roasted chestnuts and spicy noodles filling the air. Beijing was chaotic, alive, intimidating, but I loved it already. Every corner was a story, every street a theatre. On my third evening, I wandered into that dumpling shop. It was warm, fragrant with garlic and vinegar, filled with chatter. I sat alone, battling chopsticks like they were enemy weapons, and just when I flung a dumpling halfway across the table, someone slid into the seat opposite me. "Ni hao," he said, smiling. I froze, dumpling mid-air. He looked about my age, messy dark hair, rolled-up sleeves, and eyes that sparkled with amusement. Hello," I squeaked. To my relief, he answered in English, slightly accented. "You look lost. That obvious." I laughed nervously. "I'm new. Very new. Locals don't usually fight dumplings like this," he teased. I groaned. "They started it." He chuckled and, with graceful ease, picked up a dumpling with his chopsticks, placing it into my bowl. "See? Easy. Easy for you," I muttered. But when I tried again, I somehow managed to succeed. My face lit up like I had won an Olympic medal. "Congratulations," he said seriously, though his eyes twinkled. "Your first dumpling victory." His name was Li Wei, a graduate student in architecture at Beijing University. He told me he came to the shop almost every night because, as he put it, good dumplings are cheaper than therapy. We ended up talking for nearly 2 hours, about my teaching job, about his dreams of designing buildings that blended tradition with modernity, about the terrifying chaos of Beijing traffic. By the time we parted, I felt strangely lighter, as if I wasn't quite so alone anymore. "Will you come back tomorrow?" he asked, smiling. "The dumplings will miss you." I pretended to think. "Only if you don't laugh at my chopstick skills." "Deal." He held out his hand, and when I shook it, my heart gave a small, traitorous flip. Walking back to my tiny apartment under the glow of city lights, I realized I was grinning. Maybe it was just the thrill of being in a new country. Or maybe, just maybe, it had something to do with him. The morning of my first real day as teacher Emily did not exactly go as planned. My alarm betrayed me by not ringing, or maybe I betrayed myself by pressing snooze too many times, I wasn't sure. Either way, I woke up in a panic, with only 30 minutes to get ready. My hair refused to cooperate, the hot water in the shower decided to play hide and seek, and the kettle made noises like it was about to explode before producing nothing but lukewarm water that tasted faintly metallic. I gulped it down anyway, hoping caffeine of any temperature might give me courage. Running out the door, I realized I had left my lesson plan neatly folded on the kitchen table. I sprinted back up 4 flights of stairs, grabbed it, and nearly tripped over the neighbor's cat, who glared at me with the judgmental authority of a landlord. By the time I reached the subway, I was sweating, frazzled, and already late. The train was so packed that I had to squeeze in sideways, pressed so tightly between strangers that I could feel someone else's shopping bag digging into my ribs. The carriage swayed, people shouted into phones, an old man snored peacefully against my shoulder, and I thought, if I survive this, I can survive anything. When I finally stumbled into my new classroom, I was greeted by 30 small faces, wide-eyed and expectant. Their innocence made my stomach twist with both nerves and determination. I smiled too brightly, picked up the chalk, and wrote on the board, "My name is Emily." To my surprise, the class erupted in enthusiastic applause, like I had just announced I was a celebrity. Encouraged, I asked them to introduce themselves. The first boy jumped up, puffed out his chest, and declared, "My name is Spider-Man." The next girl said, "My name is Elsa." By the time we reached the fifth Iron Man, I realized the Marvel Cinematic Universe had apparently enrolled in my class. I decided not to argue. "Nice to meet you, Avengers," I said, and they giggled so hard that for a moment I felt like maybe I was doing something right. The day flew by in a blur of broken Mandarin, exaggerated hand gestures, and endless repetitions of "very good." By the last bell, I was drained but proud. I had survived my first day without fainting or crying, both possibilities I had considered that morning. My feet carried me automatically back toward the dumpling shop, because the thought of cooking alone in my empty apartment felt unbearable. When I pushed open the door, the warmth of garlic, vinegar, and steamed pork greeted me like an old friend. And there he was again, Li Wei, sitting by the same window, sketchbook open, pencil dancing across the page. He looked up, saw me, and smiled like he had been expecting me all along. "You survived," he said with playful solemnity. "Barely," I admitted, dropping into the chair opposite him. "The subway is a war zone, my students are all superheroes, and a grandmother nearly crushed me to death with her shopping cart." He laughed so hard he almost spilled his tea. "Welcome to Beijing. You are already learning." I rolled my eyes but couldn't help laughing too. It felt strangely easy, sitting there with him. We ordered dumplings, and while we waited, he let me peek into his sketchbook. Buildings flowed across the pages, towers that reached for the sky but curved gracefully like willow branches. They were stunning. "They are beautiful," I whispered. He shrugged, almost shy. "Just ideas. Dreams are free, at least." Our food arrived before. By the third week in Beijing, I had convinced myself I was becoming a local. I could say a handful of useful phrases in Mandarin, I could order dumplings without accidentally requesting chicken feet, and I could even navigate the subway without panicking. That confidence, however, turned out to be a dangerous thing. It all began with a bicycle. One of my colleagues insisted that cycling was the best way to see the city, and against my better judgment, I downloaded one of those bike rental apps. The next morning, I proudly unlocked a bright orange bicycle and pedaled off to school. For the first 5 minutes, I felt free and adventurous, hair flying, city rushing past me. By the 6th minute, I realized Beijing traffic was less breezy adventure and more survival of the fittest. Cars honked, buses loomed, scooters darted like dragonflies, and I wobbled dangerously between them all, praying for my life. Somehow, I survived the ride to school and back, and by evening, I was feeling smug enough to take a shortcut through the narrow Hutong alleyways. Big mistake. The alleys twisted and turned like a labyrinth designed by someone with a sense of humor. I pedaled bravely at first, then slower, then stopped altogether when I realized I had absolutely no idea where I was. I tried using my phone, but the GPS spun in confused circles, mocking me. That's when I heard someone laugh. I turned, and of course, there was Li Wei, leaning casually against his own bicycle, watching me with that familiar sparkle in his eyes. "Lost?" he asked, like it was obvious. I sighed dramatically. "How do you keep finding me at my worst moments?" "Maybe destiny," he said with a teasing smile. "Or maybe you just look very foreign and very confused." "Both true," I admitted, climbing awkwardly off the bicycle before I crashed into a dumpling stand. He offered to guide me out of the maze, and I gratefully followed, pushing my bike beside his. As we walked, he told me stories about the Hutongs, about families who had lived there for generations, about children playing hide-and-seek in the courtyards, about old men who claimed to have seen ghosts near the temples. His voice was calm, steady, full of affection for the city that still overwhelmed me. At one point, we passed a tiny tea shop, and he insisted we stop. The owner, an old woman with sharp eyes and a mischievous grin, immediately decided I needed to taste 5 different teas. Li Wei translated her rapid Mandarin, though I suspected he added his own jokes, because every time she laughed, he smirked at me. By the time we finally made it out of the hutongs and back onto a main street, the sky was glowing pink and orange with sunset. I felt tired, but also strangely peaceful. "So," Li Wei said as we stopped beside the dumpling shop, "do you still think the shortcut was a good idea?" "Terrible idea," I admitted. "Best terrible idea ever." He grinned, and for a moment, under the lanterns and fading sky, I thought maybe I didn't mind being lost, as long as it was with him. If someone had told me a month ago that I would be standing on a tiny stage in Beijing, holding a microphone, and preparing to sing in front of a room full of strangers, I would have laughed, cried, and possibly fainted. Yet there I was, dragged into a neon-lit karaoke bar by my fellow teachers, blinking under flashing lights while the screen in front of me displayed a music video involving a dramatic love story I didn't understand. My colleagues were thrilled, cheering me on like I was a pop star about to debut. "Just sing anything," one of them shouted. "English song is fine." Unfortunately, my mind went completely blank. Every English song I had ever known evaporated into the smoky air. The microphone felt heavy, the backing track began, and I was seconds away from humiliating myself when, to my utter shock, Li Wei appeared. He had apparently been invited by one of my colleagues, though I suspected fate had once again engineered my embarrassment. He grabbed a second microphone, glanced at the screen, and with a grin said, "Don't worry. I help." The music swelled, and before I knew it, we were singing together. Well, he was singing confidently in Mandarin, and I was half singing, half giggling, adding random English words whenever I recognized the melody. The crowd loved it. My colleagues clapped along, strangers in the bar cheered, and I couldn't stop laughing at the ridiculousness of it all. At one point, Li Wei leaned close and whispered, "Just follow me." His voice was smooth, steady, carrying the tune perfectly, and somehow it made me brave enough to try. By the final chorus, I was actually singing, not well, but loudly and with complete abandon. When the song ended, the room erupted in applause, and I collapsed into laughter, cheeks burning from both effort and the warmth of the moment. Li Wei bowed dramatically, then offered his hand to help me down from the stage. "See? Not so bad," he said, eyes shining. "That was terrible," I argued, still laughing. "Terribly fun," he corrected. We sat together afterward, sipping overly sweet cocktails served in glowing plastic cups while my colleagues took over the stage with an enthusiastic but painful rendition of a K-pop hit. "So," I said, turning to him, "do you always rescue foreigners from karaoke disasters?" "Only the ones who fight dumplings," he replied with a smirk. His words made me laugh again, but beneath the joke, I felt something shift, something quiet and unspoken. There was a closeness between us now, built not just on dumplings and accidents but on shared laughter, on the way he looked at me like I wasn't just another lost foreigner in his city. When we left the karaoke bar later that night, the streets were still alive with music and neon lights. The air was cool, the city buzzing around us, and as we walked side by side, I realized I wasn't dreading tomorrow. Instead, I was already wondering what other unexpected adventures might bring us together. By now I had learned that whenever Li Wei said, "Don't worry, it will be fun," what he really meant was, "You are about to embarrass yourself in front of many people." This time, it was his idea to take me to a hot pot restaurant. I had heard about hot pot, giant bubbling pots of broth in the center of the table, endless plates of raw meat and vegetables to cook yourself, but I had never experienced it. "It's easy," he promised as we walked into a crowded restaurant full of steam, chatter, and the clatter of chopsticks. "You will love it." Famous last words. At first, everything seemed fine. The pot was divided into two sections. One mild broth, one so spicy it looked like lava. Plates of thinly sliced beef, mushrooms, tofu, and mysterious vegetables arrived at our table. Li Wei demonstrated. Dip, swish, wait, eat. Easy enough. I copied him, feeling very accomplished, until I accidentally dropped an entire plate of spinach into the spicy side. Red broth splashed dramatically, nearly scalding my arm, and the waiter rushed over with extra napkins while Li Wei tried, unsuccessfully, to hide his laughter. "You are making soup for the whole restaurant," he teased as I blushed furiously. Things only got worse when I decided to try dipping noodles. No one warned me that hot pot noodles behave like living creatures. The moment I dropped them in, They tangled themselves into knots and refused to be rescued. I battled them with chopsticks, splashing broth everywhere, until Li Wei calmly reached over and helped, his movements smooth while mine were pure chaos. "Maybe you should stay with mushrooms," he said diplomatically. I wanted to argue, but just then I accidentally bit into a chili pepper hidden in my bowl. My mouth ignited. Tears streamed down my face. I grabbed the nearest drink and chugged it, only to discover it was pure sesame sauce. Li Wei nearly fell off his chair laughing while I coughed and fanned my burning tongue. "Stop laughing," I managed to squeak, my voice hoarse. "I'm dying." "No, no, you are living very strongly," he said between laughs. In the end, I survived, though my dignity did not. When the meal was over, I was a mess of sweat, sauce, and regret. Li Wei, on the other hand, looked perfectly calm, as if hot pot disasters were an everyday occurrence. As we stepped outside into the cool night air, I groaned. "That was horrible." "That was perfect," he corrected gently. "Perfect." I stared at him. I nearly drowned in chili oil. He shrugged, smiling. "You laughed, I laughed. That's perfect." And just like that, I realized he was right. Despite the chaos, or maybe because of it, the night had been strangely wonderful. I found myself laughing too, not at the disaster, but at the way it had turned into something memorable. As we walked side by side, the city lights reflecting in his dark eyes, I wondered if maybe Beijing wasn't trying to swallow me whole after all. Maybe it was trying to give me stories worth keeping. And maybe, just maybe, Li Wei was becoming one of them. I stood there, unable to move, my breath shallow as if the air itself had turned heavy against my chest. The silence after everything felt deafening, as though the world had decided to pause and leave me alone with the weight of my choice. My hands were trembling, and though I tried to hide it, every nerve in me screamed of exhaustion and fear. For so long I had run from the truth, pretended that what waited at the end of this road was nothing more than a story told to frighten children. But now it was here before me, undeniable, tangible, and no one else could reach for it but me. I took a single step forward, the echo of my footfall rushing through the vast chamber, reminding me that I was not only alive but also painfully, terrifyingly aware of my solitude. I had thought that victory would taste like triumph, but it was bitter, filled with doubt, for I knew that taking what lay before me meant changing everything. My reflection in the dark surface of the relic looked like a stranger, a girl I once was but could never be again. I wanted to cry, to scream, to release the storm building inside me, but I swallowed it all, pressing my lips together until they hurt. My heart pounded as I reached out, fingers hesitating inches away from the object that had consumed our lives and shattered so many paths. Was it salvation, or a curse disguised as hope? I thought of the faces of those I had lost, of promises whispered in the dark, of the fire that had carried me this far. Their voices lived in me, urging me forward, reminding me that I was not just myself anymore. I carried all of them, their faith, their mistakes, their love. When my skin finally brushed the surface, warmth flooded me, unexpected and terrifying. It was not the cold weight of stone or metal, but something alive, pulsing in rhythm with my own heartbeat. A shock of light flared behind my eyes, and in that moment I felt the world tilt, as if reality itself was holding its breath. I closed my fingers around it, and the silence broke like glass. Whispers filled my head, promises and warnings tangled together, voices ancient and desperate. But through the chaos I heard my own voice rising steady, clear, unwilling to surrender. I was no longer afraid. I had carried fear long enough. Now it was time to carry power, responsibility, and the unknown future that came with it. My knees weakened, yet I stood taller than ever, gripping the relic with all the strength I had left. I realized then that this was not the end but the beginning, and though my path was covered in shadows, I was ready to walk it. For the first time, I felt not like the girl I had been, but like the woman I was becoming.